Hello, disc golfers. It's been a while, but I'm so happy to be back here talking to you on this Zen Disc Golf podcast. I want to tell you right off the bat that this episode is going to be a little different. There's not going to be any intro music, no outro music, just 4 dudes, 4 microphones, and we're going to get the job done. So let me go ahead and introduce these guys to you. If you've been listening to us at all before, everyone's going to be familiar, if not just the name be familiar. First of all, Mr. Chris Bowden of the DG Puttheads blog. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fantastic. Secondly, Mr. Tim Stewart of the Mind Body Disc blog.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Tim. Thirdly, myself, I am Patrick McCormick of The Zen and the Art of Disc Golf, the book, The Zen and the Art of Disc Golf. And last but not least, we have a very special guest who's never been on the show. However, his name's been mentioned many times, Mr. Rodney Lane, also from the DG Puttheads blog. How are you, Rodney?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So happy to have you. So on this episode, we have several pieces of several huge announcements. And I personally think that they're all good. I think the first announcement everyone's really going to like. I think everybody's really going to be excited about it. In 2014, I dropped Zen and the Art of Disc Golf on the world, and that's what got this whole ball rolling. The social media, the blog, the podcast, the worldwide following. And within only months after releasing that, I've started receiving some emails and messages asking for a follow-up. And to be honest, I wasn't quite sure how I wrote a whole book about disc golf, period, much less how I would write a follow-up. But after almost about a year and a half of talking to amazing people on this podcast, started getting inspired again and putting together my Discs and Zen segment. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the follow-up to Zen and the Art of Disc Golf is about 80% completed and personally slated to drop the first week of November.
Nice.
That is exciting. We've been waiting a long time for that.
Thank you. The title of the book is going to be Discs and Zen. So, surprisingly, more writings, and then the subtitle, More Writings About Disc Golf and Life. I've asked Mr. Tim Stewart to write the foreword for the book, and he agreed, and I am super excited about that. So thank you, Tim, for that.
Hey, man, I'm honored. It's a pleasure.
I'm honored. So that being said, while in between trying to finish that and having to chase around a screaming 1-year-old, and also I've been, if you've stayed tuned to the last podcast, a couple of the other podcasts, we're working on moving and purchasing a new house on a large piece of land in the country. So this makes my time very limited, unfortunately, to regularly podcast with these gentlemen. So, that's why it's been so long between the last podcast and this podcast. But a lot of thinking and brainstorming about the direction of this podcast has occurred, both on my side and thinking about what I wanted to do, if we wanted to continue, how I was going to find time to complete the book and be the father that I want to be. So I talked to both Chris and Tim, and they actually went out and played around together. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
We played 2 rounds.
Two rounds.
We liked each other that much.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So during their round, they kind of brainstormed on what they thought the direction of the podcast and their direction for supporting disc golf is going to be in general. From what I understand, Chris went back and you and Rodney came up with some ideas for some new direction of the cast, brought it to me. I absolutely approve with their ideas. And I want to talk to them a little bit later in the podcast and talk to them about, how, Chris is planning to actually carry the torch of the Zen Disc Golf podcast for me. So up front, Chris, thank you very much for that. We've worked very hard on this podcast, and I didn't want to see it die. And it's not going to die because of you.
Nobody wants to see it die. This has been It's a wonderful podcast. It's been a great experience, and I mean, I've told you a million times already. I can't thank you enough for letting me be part of this. So, we get this opportunity to carry it on, and we initially, Rodney and I met Tim over at Flip City and played a couple of rounds. And initially, we were talking that we just didn't think we'd have the time. I mean, it's a commitment, but then Rodney and I, on the drive back, we started talking about it more and more, and we realized, you know what, Rodney's already got the equipment in his basement. We love talking about disc golf.
Perfect.
It's just I think it's meant to be.
Awesome. And so this doesn't mean that you're not going to hear from me anymore. I'm more than willing to join in Chris and Rodney in the future if they'll allow me to. But unfortunately,
we'd love to have you on.
but I will be working with them in the background, especially in the beginning, to make sure that everything gets rolling the way that they want it to go. But in the future, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to host the podcast any longer, and also put out the next book, and also be like I said, the father that I want to be, and take care of this large property that we just bought, which seemed like a great idea, and it's still I can't wait. It's 8 acres, and I'm putting a 9-hole course on it starting out anyway.
It's going to be so worth it when you get that up.
Yeah.
And then when you have us out there to play, of course.
Absolutely, and you're very welcome to come out and play. But it's our goal to transition the podcast so that listeners will not have to subscribe to a new podcast, actually have to do nothing but just continue to listen. Also, none of the past Zen Disc Golf podcasts will be deleted and will always be there for your listening pleasure. Before we talk to Chris and Rodney about their plans for the podcast, I want to let you know, the question that might be on all of our subscribers' minds. Well, what happens to their donations? Well, a couple things. I'm going to let you know that I'm going to be refunding all of last month's podcast subscriber dollar donations. And in addition to that, I have chosen 2 winners this month instead of 1. And I thought that would be the best way to kind of start fresh. So super congratulations to Ryan Lewis and Melissa Martin, who I'm going to be sending $20 gift cards to Infinite Discs.
That's pretty awesome.
So let's talk to Chris and Rodney about the podcast. So Chris, Rodney, tell us about it. Where are we going with this?
I think I'll let Rodney start off. Rodney came up with the idea of sticking with a similar theme of the name, going with Just Throw podcast because it's
awesome.
Something you've used. So I'll hand that over to Rodney and let him take that.
That's right. So we shared a document, and I don't know, there were probably 40 different names in there, ranging from hilarious to stupid. But then we came up with Just Throw. Of course, we asked your permission on that one. I think that'll help kind of link the former version of the podcast, the new version. Pretty excited to get that going. A lot of our conversation with Tim during the round and on the way home afterwards, we really discussed how can we make this happen, but make it easier on us. And I think that process is still, we're gonna hash that out as we go, make it a little less time commitment for us. But right now, I think, Chris, our goal is to do 2 episodes a month, and we're going to see how that works for us. There might be a time when we want to throw an extra special bonus episode in there. But between that and writing the articles, I think we can provide a good amount of content for everyone out there. The main thing that we spoke about on the way home, we were talking about all of these topic ideas that we have for articles that are just sitting in a queue because neither of us can seem to figure out a way to make it into an article, and started listing some of those ideas out. And a lot of them are great conversation topics. And that was one of the things that Tim talked about a lot, is how really this is a disc golf conversation. And through the past several episodes, listening along, that's what I feel like. I feel like I belong to this conversation. So now I guess we'll do a little more leading on that end. But hopefully the listeners can feel that same way as we go forward.
Absolutely.
So, for example, when Rodney mentioned that there's a lot of articles that we have trouble just putting in, or a lot of topics we have trouble putting in article form. When him and Tim and I were over at Flip City, we ended up having some difficulty with the T-pads because these T-pads are somewhat narrow and they're about average length, maybe a little bit shorter, was it? We were looking at, and they're rounded at the front, but then there was a black line drawn across them before the rounding, where you're supposed to use the line as a foot fault line. So it was difficult for us to not only get used to the having a foot fault line and trying to get our minds wrapped around stopping at an arbitrary point rather than the end of the T-pad, but then even dealing with the rounded T-pad where there's a chance of slipping off, and that's just kind of difficult to get into article form because there's a lot of it's very subjective and a lot of back and forth. I like this, I don't like that. So hopefully we can bring those up throughout the pods.
I love that you guys are doing that because I'm with you, and I've probably got a backlog of at least 100 article ideas, and it's the exact same thing. I don't know if anybody out there, who doesn't write really can grasp how much work it takes to take an idea for an article and then make it into something that's readable, enjoyable, understandable, makes sense, makes a good point, makes you happy that you spent time reading it, when it would be so much easier to just have a conversation about it. And I love that you guys are doing that. This is a fantastic idea.
I really like that y'all, and not just because of the just throw whole concept. I think it's interesting that we always ended the episode with, and don't forget, just throw, and that you're picking up from where everything ended. And I think that was a great idea for transition. I did want to talk, just rewind a little bit and talk about how Rodney was mentioning how time consuming this podcast is. I don't think a lot of people really understand why a podcast would ever be time consuming, because we have so many great podcasts out there, and it just seems like, hey, you just record and then you hit record and then you upload and then there it is, it's done. But what goes into this podcast is preparing, trying to get everybody on the same schedule. Obviously the technology part of it, the engineering part of it, but then trying to figure out subject matter. And then we start adding in guests, making sure that their technology is compatible with ours because we're never in the same room. So then we have show notes, and then we have our conversation. Our conversation usually lasts about an hour and a half to 2 hours, of which only 45 minutes to an hour of that is actually usable content. So then the editing period of that can take 8 hours. It was taking me about 8 hours to do it. And I'm an experienced audio engineer and editor. Rodney said, you were mentioning that you have a lot of audio equipment in your basement. I have I come from an audio engineering background. So 8 hours, to edit an hour, and there's other things. You take a break for lunch, you take a pee break or whatever, but it just takes forever. And then when you're done with that, you have the uploading process, you have the online process of uploading it and putting your show notes, putting your links, and then you have subscribers that you got, and then the social media. And so it has been a pleasure for me to do this podcast, but it has been really time consuming. And before starting a podcast, I don't even think I had the appreciation for how long it would take to put together something like this. And so Rodney and Chris, I know Chris decently well. Rodney, this is actually the first time I've talked to you, Rodney.
Right.
Chris is a very all about the numbers, very he's very down and dirty with the details and trying to make things work. And
I am a data scientist.
Data scientist. Okay, that's the best way to put it. So I think that you're probably going to find inefficiency in my workflow and be able to take that and make it faster, work better, and God bless you for that.
Well, then you also got Rodney, who's a lead developer. I think he's even more focused on the processes than I am. So I think that's going to be one of our main focuses.
Awesome. I think y'all are going to have a lot more luck than I do. And the 2 a month, I think, is an absolutely great goal. I think when Zach and I started this podcast, we were trying to do 2 to 3 a month, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And then recently, it's just kind of been very difficult to get it all done with the screaming 1-year-old. So what else? What can we expect? What kind of content can we expect with the Just Throw podcast? Is it going to be very similar? Is it going to be a little different? What can we expect?
I think we're going to have a lot of very similar content. At least at first, we're not going to have quite as many guests. I think we need to work out our own flow first, but we do plan to have guests, hopefully not too far away. I think it's going to be a lot of the similar mental aspects, a lot of strategy. We're probably not going to have a moment of Zen at the beginning, but we're going to probably have some sort of a similar segment where we talk about some sort of mindfulness or focus. So it's going to be very familiar for the users. I'm sorry, for the
there's a data scientist. That's the data scientist coming at him.
Still focused on software. So it should be very similar, very comfortable transition, but with just basically our own touches. Rodney, that sound about right?
Yeah, I think so. It goes along with my background playing a lot of golf and even other sports. This whole concept of mindfulness, strategy, course management, all these topics that float around in my head, and I feel like they're valuable to other people. And at least if you look at Tim's blog and Patrick's first book, those topics are valuable for many people. So that's our goal, to really attack those specific items. And I think we'll branch out, maybe talk about new products and whatnot. But I think we're going to, I talked with Chris, and one of our main things, we're going to keep it focused on you as the disc golfer. I know there's a lot of great podcasts out there talking about what's going on with the professional disc golfers, but we're going to keep this one focused on the disc golfer, the weekend casual player, and see where that takes us.
I think that's huge. I think that's a lot of our listener base, really our users. A lot of our users really, really appreciate that. And they've been very vocal about that, saying that, this is the podcast for the every disc golfer, for the every man or every woman, every disc golfer. So that's awesome. When can we look forward to your first episode, guys?
Well, that's a great question. I think we've got the setup all ready to go. I've recorded some demo takes just to make sure everything works.
The demo takes were awesome, by the way, because it was Rodney by himself. So he would ask me a question and then answer it himself.
Please do that in outtakes.
Right. No, yeah, so in reality, Chris and I get together a decent amount. He only lives a few miles away, and obviously he's my brother-in-law, so we get together with the family and whatnot. So really, our goal is to be able to push out an episode in the next few weeks. A lot of that will depend on how we can transition things like the feed and the storage location and everything else. We've got a couple kinks to work out on the back end. But,
right, and I'm gonna be helping you guys with that as well, and trying to make it as seamless as possible, because we want it seamless as possible for our users as well, for the subscribers.
I got you stuck on users now.
Yeah, I am. So that our listeners don't have to subscribe to a new podcast. It's going to be. This is a transition period for the podcast. The name is changing, but it sounds like a lot of the content is going to stay the same. They're gonna let me back on the cast. It just depends on how often how much editing they have to do of me. They may decide never to have me on again. No, but for real. So my book is coming. My second book is going to be coming out hopefully in November, and hopefully these guys allow me to be on several of the casts coming up to the release.
Well, of course, and I think we've already dubbed you the Podfather of Just Throw, so it's expected that you'll be back on it sometime.
The Podfather, I love it. That's awesome. I can't thank you guys enough for, allowing me to pass the torch on to you guys. For a little while there, it was definitely a rough decision to have to come to, and I'm sure you can hear it in my voice. It's a difficult thing to have to give up something that you've given birth to. But it was either the podcast or my son. And so
difficult decision, but I think you made the right one.
It took me weeks, and so yeah, this is not the easiest thing in the world to do, to hand it over, but I think I found the best people to possibly hand this thing over to, and I'm so looking forward to hearing what you guys are able to do with it. And golly, I know that you guys are going to be super successful, and man, I'm excited about it.
You're very kind. I love your optimism.
It should be awesome, guys. I was telling you, after we finished our rounds at Flip, which by the way, if anybody gets a chance to go to Flip City in Michigan, that course is amazing. But I was driving home, and I know we talked about it, and it sounded like at the end of the round that I definitely didn't have time to take up the mantle. And it sounded like it was kind of just gonna die a quiet death. And when you guys contacted out and said, "Hey, we're gonna keep it going. We're gonna pick up where Pat's leaving off," I was actually really, really happy to hear that. So and I agree with Pat. It couldn't be in better hands.
Thank you.
I want to hear some of the titles that didn't make it.
Yeah, do you have that list?
Yeah, let me pull that up real quick here.
Yeah, we had a couple of pretty terrible ones.
We want to just hear the terrible ones.
No, to be fair, we did throw out a lot of really terrible ones just so that we could get brainstorming. And I put up a list and I said, Rodney, here's a list. I want you to know these are intentionally not good. I just want us to think about them. So,
right.
Because if you say any of the ones that might be better, then it's opportunity cost for people, and it's just like, it could have been that.
So I started going off of just a number of terms that were related to Zen. I was pretty familiar with it. I've got a bachelor's. My second bachelor's degree was in comparative religion, and
which you've never mentioned on the podcast. I just want to.
No, I haven't. Actually, I have not. Have I? So we started going through a couple of them, like disc golf Nirvana, pure disc golf Aria. Let's see, disc golf Dow was a pretty cool one, which I don't think would have worked, but sounded pretty awesome. Dow disc golf.
Dow disc, yeah.
Dowte disc golf. Let's see. Then we had disc golf junkies. But,
the junkie thing that kind of brings that whole drug reference back into the sport. Hashtag kill the sport. I like it. Keep going.
I don't think Disc Golf Academy. I don't think we had too many more. A couple of references to the phallic-shaped T-pads at Flip City.
Yeah, attention designers at Flip City. I appreciate you bringing out the 12-year-old in me, but you really need to shape those T-pads differently. I'm just saying.
That's awesome.
The football line didn't help with that.
So what do you guys think? Do you have some other pretty bad ones that we could have named it?
Oh man, I have no idea. It was pretty easy. It was pretty simple when I came up with Zen Disc Golf Podcast. We already had the website at zendiscgolf.com. So it was ready to go. I think y'all did great.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, you picked the right name for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, and Foot Fault Disc Golf, which also came from the T-pads at Flip City.
So you're going to continue the blog as well?
Yes, we are. So one of our staples is putter reviews. I don't think the putter reviews would go over as well on a podcast, so we're going to continue putter reviews for sure on the blog. Mm-hmm. When we find an article that we think would be good for a topic that would be good for long article form, or especially something that would work for organic searches, we'll put that up there. But a lot of our topics will go into the pod now. We also understanding that the pod, I believe, should hit a different audience. So we're going to try a couple of different things on the blog and see what works. We'll definitely keep the putter reviews going. And then on the blog, I think we might try to get into some other disc reviews, similar to what we've been doing in the past with just general disc reviews. So that way we can branch out on discs in general, but still keep the blog more putter focused.
Okay, fantastic. I want to thank Chris and Rodney again for carrying the torch on this podcast. And I sound a little somber now. I shouldn't sound so somber because guess what? A new Zen and the Art of Disc Golf book is coming out hopefully in November. Discs and Zen, more writings about disc golf and life. And I hope everyone's excited about that today as they were when they were asking for it back in 2014 already.
There will be a celebration when that comes out.
Yes. And so, like I said, I will hopefully be on this podcast, which will now be called the Just Throw Podcast with Chris and Rodney. I want to thank all of the followers and listeners and, as Chris puts them, the users. And I am sure the Just Throw Podcast will continue to bring you the best in disc golf entertainment. Stay tuned for the book. You will definitely know when it's coming out. It's going to hit all the social media. It'll hit their podcasts, probably hit some other podcasts that I've been on before. Again, hopefully in the first week of November, so you can get that in some people's Christmas stockings, hopefully. But you know what? Thank you all so much. And this isn't the last you'll hear from me. But most importantly, Just Throw Podcast.